Closing arguments will begin today in the federal trial of 3 former Minneapolis police officers charged with violating George Floyd's civil rights.
The defense rested yesterday after 18 days of testimony. More than 30 witnesses took the stand, including all 3 defendants. NBC News correspondent Meagan Fitzgerald joins us now with more on this. So, Meagan, first of all, just remind us what these 3 officers are charged with here in this case and what they could be facing if found guilty.
Well, Joe, good morning. These officers are facing federal charges for violating George Floyd's civil rights. Now, what these charges are alleging is that these 3 officers saw that George Floyd needed medical aid and they failed to render aid, as is their duty as police officers. Then J. Alexander King, as well as Tu Tao, are facing an additional charge of failing to intervene, failing to stop Derek Chauvin when he had his knee on George Floyd's neck. All of these officers are facing up to life in prison, though we did speak to legal analysts, and they say that it's likely that they will see far less charges, or far less time, rather. Joe?
And Megan, hey, it's Savannah. As we mentioned, all 3 defendants took the stand. Thomas Lane choked back tears while testifying yesterday. We saw a court drawing of that. What did they each have to say, and what were the defense's main arguments?
So, Savannah, the overwhelming theme here is that these officers are shifting the blame to Derek Chauvin. They're saying George Floyd is dead because of the actions of Derek Chauvin, and that he was the senior officer on the scene, this 19-year veteran, and they deferred to him. But let's break it down from each officer who took the stand. As you mentioned, Lane, we saw him breaking down yesterday, very emotional on the stand, as he said he tried to do what he could to help George Floyd, even saying that he asked twice if they should roll him over, saying that he conducted CPR on Floyd moments before the paramedics arrived and even offered to ride along with them because he said that George Floyd didn't look good and he was not aware of the condition that George Floyd was in until the paramedics arrived. Then you saw J. Alexander King, and basically he said, his defense attorneys argued that he was inexperienced. This was the first full week that he was on the streets as a police officer, as well as Lane, and that the training from the police department failed them. It wasn't adequate enough. Then you had Tu Tao. He was the officer that was trying to keep these the crowd at bay, keeping them back. His argument was that he was focusing on the crowd, making sure that these officers were handling the business of taking care of George Floyd, and that he didn't realize that George Floyd needed medical aid because he was focused on the crowd, guys.
So, Megan, it's been nearly 2 years since George Floyd was murdered. The legal battles, though, are far from over. After the jury issues a verdict in this federal trial, these same 3 officers will face a state trial. That's in June. How's that one going to be different?
Yeah, Joe, so right to point that out. Just a few more months and they're going to be back in state court. They are facing, all 3 of these officers are facing aiding and abetting murder as well as manslaughter. So essentially that their actions helped Derek Chauvin kill George Floyd. So they contributed to his death. And as you mentioned, they will be back in court in June.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.